Hi guys, my name is Joe and my channel is Fighting Words, the Martial Arts Library. And this is a segment I call Tangent Tuesday. Tangent Tuesday is the second Tuesday of every month. And I pick a topic and I just sort of riff on it, give my thoughts on it. Um, this week I'm going to talk about my thoughts on martial arts and its portrayal in various media. Um, I just, my brain's a little fuzzy. Blame daylight savings time, I guess. So just want to pick something fun. Um, anyway, before I hit into that, um, really quick, I have two short announcements. The first one is this is November, so Black Friday is going to be coming up toward the end of the month. Now, what I did last year and I will do this year is the Friday video I'm going to release that week is going to have every martial arts and martial arts related sale that I can find. So we're talking gear like Hayabusa, Century, all that stuff. We're talking martial arts publishing companies like Tambuli Media. We're talking instructionals like the BJJ Fanatics family of stores. And I'm going to release that. I'm also probably going to find things that are related, like just general martial art, or excuse me, just general like book sales that are going on. If like Books a Million has a sale for Black Friday, I'll let you guys know. Um, Also, any fitness stuff that I think martial artists might like. I forget which brand it was last year, but I did find um, at least one fitness site where it was going to be things like kettlebells and resistance bands, and it seems like martial artists will pick up on that. So that's going to be on Black Friday. And what happened last year was that after I released the video on Friday, over the following days, I learned of more sales. So I did a really short, well, I say short, it was still like 10 minutes long. Release a second video, I think that Sunday, the following Sunday. But if if you want to find out what the best martial arts deals are for Black Friday, I'm going to try to have them out there for you guys. I'm not sponsored by any of these folks. We all love martial arts here, right? We love learning about it. We love doing it. So my hope for you is that I can provide some way for you guys to look up, and get the martial arts goodies that you want, when they are cheaper than normal. The second um, little announcement is I'm trying to get you guys to have more input on the reviews I do, the material I cover. So earlier this week, I put out a survey. I think I have a community tab now. I'm not sure why, but on that survey, I'm giving 5 options for you guys to pick the first Aikido book that I review. Um, I'm also I, in order to give you guys a better voice in the stuff that I review, I have a 2 reviews in the works on things that people on Instagram and in the comment section have said that they enjoyed. So I promise I'm getting to that stuff. I'm going to start doing more stuff that you guys specifically request. So head over to that survey and please click something, because last time I checked, it had 2 votes and they were for 2 different books, which narrows it down. But please add your voice to the to that survey and let me know what you'd like me to review next. Anyway, martial arts in media. Like I said, I'm just going to have a little bit of fun with this one. You guys know that I have Media Fight Mondays, and those are from television, movies, animation. I pick a fight scene and I review it and sort of grade it. On top of that, um, well, shouldn't say that. Anyway, I would also like to do scenes from comics. I don't know how to do that. I've seen guys release, videos covering comic book fight scenes. There are a lot of good fight scenes in comics that I don't know how I could put them out in a Media Fight Monday format. I like to focus on the folks with like more realistic skills, like Batman and Captain America and those guys. Um, I it's interesting that they both came out around 1940. I want to say Batman might have been 39, but it's interesting to see that initially in their run they took the the martial arts that were available at the time. I remember specifically Captain America's fighting style when he first came out back then was a mixture of boxing, judo, because judo and traditional jiu-jitsu were popular, and gymnastics, which, all right. um, so it's interesting that the creators were looking for specific things that they knew about. In some Batman comics, it'll, you know, if you look across the breadth of Batman media, he's done so many martial arts. A lot of times he's, more recently, he's sort of been associated with ninjutsu. Um, Keezy Fighting Method was sort of the stand-in for that, and the Batman Begins, Christian Bale's first appearance. But I remember reading a comic where, like, Bruce Wayne was suffering from amnesia, and Nightwing, Dick Grayson, was sort of, is he just faking it? And hit him with a kick. And it was interesting that his commentary, the author of that panel knew something, because he was like, you say I always telegraph that Jeet Kune Do sidekick. So, he had a very specific martial art in mind. And Batman is also supposed to have learned boxing under, I think his name is Ted Grant. The identity is Wildcat, who was a boxer from back in the day. And also in comic book panels, I don't know if I've mentioned this in one of my shorter videos, but they released a comic, I want to say it was probably the 70s, I guess, but it was Superman versus Muhammad Ali. And of course, they had to have some comic book silliness in order for this to happen, like aliens come down and who are your world's champions? But there's this wonderful panel, and I don't know how much input Ali actually had in it, but the panel itself, it's a full page, and he says a jab is a question mark, and he just describes beautifully what each punch is for. As he's basically trying to teach Superman how to actually fight. Superman has all these powers, and he's never needed necessarily skills before. Although, again, I know I read a comic in the early 2000s where Superman had his own Kryptonian martial art. And I think that's sort of, you see it with Star Trek too. You see I'm going all over the place. That's why it's called Tangent Tuesday. But there's sort of this Planet of the Hats, monolithic view of alien cultures. Like, think about how many martial arts and martial arts schools developed in Japan alone in like the last 400 or 500 years, considering how geographically isolated it was. Not even considering expanding that to the rest of the planet, martial arts from, sub-Saharan Africa and the Indian subcontinent and, all over Europe and the New World, and like all that stuff. How many martial arts does the planet Earth have? Krypton's got one. Vulcan has one. The Klingon homeworld has one martial art. And you know what? It's tangent, so I'm going to move into Star Trek. It is interesting to me. There was an episode of Star Trek Voyager where their security chief, who was a Vulcan named Tuvok, he was over 100 years old, because Vulcans are space elves, but he was under the influence of a psychopath. It was a mind meld gone wrong. Maybe not gone wrong, but he was describing in this one scene, and it's been a long time since I've seen it. I wish I could remember it word for word, but he's talking about, like, I know 73 ways to kill you with a finger or something like that. He's describing, in my occupation as security chief, I have learned all these various martial arts from all these other worlds, which is why I wish I was in the world of Star Trek. Um, I mean, for any number of reasons, but it would be cool to learn alien fighting systems. Um, oh man. And continuing on alien fighting systems, if you guys have ever seen Farscape, I must confess, I only got like 6 episodes in. I will probably get back to it and finish it one day. But within that first half dozen or so episodes, there's like an alien assassin that comes on board and she fights like this, with I can't see it off camera, but with her hand poised over her like a scorpion's tail or something like that. And it's stupid. for, for bipedal creatures, it's a stupid way to fight, but they're like, let's come up with an alien fighting system because it works for a scorpion because it's got these two pedipalps that it can grab you with, and then it stings you. But, for a human shaped creature, it's like, all right, your attack is pretty much only going to come in one direction. I know what you're going to try to hit me with. So I don't know. It's funny the way different martial arts are perceived and how they're portrayed in different media when an author knows what they're talking about as opposed to when they don't. Like I remember reading a Wolverine novel, like Marvel Comics Wolverine, but there was a novel of an adventure he was on, and the author really wanted to introduce martial arts stuff in there, but clearly didn't know anything because he was using a thunder kick and a mountain punch, and those aren't real moves. Like the guy was just, let me put something cool sounding. It sounded like Tekken moves, right? Um, and martial arts in video games is another interesting development. I've always been more into the more realistic video games. I have 2 UFC games and I think Fight Night Round 3 or something. I'm not much of a gamer, I have to confess that. But I remember I had a roommate who got the Injustice fighting game, and I was really interested in the storyline for Injustice, but not very interested in fighting styles because these were superheroes who were shooting lasers at each other and throwing planets at each other. And my cat Harper is on the desk now. This could become perilous. Harper, back off, baby. It's okay. Yes, just stop everything you're doing. Anyway, okay, don't. Okay. So, it's interesting how these different mediums, when they have people that know what they're doing, it's interesting how they're perceived. Manga, one of like I don't read a whole lot of manga, but there's one out there called All Rounder Meguru, where a high schooler gets into amateur Shuto competitions, and along the way, he has to also pick up skills in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and Muay Thai and wrestling. And that author really knew, or either that he knew what he was talking about, or he knew people who knew what they were talking about and was consulting them, because there are elements of things like karate and judo that also show up in there. In boxing as well, because a lot of times in mixed martial arts, everyone has a base style. Megaru's style that he learned as a kid was karate, and sometimes it shows up. His rival, because it's manga, of course he has a rival, is like a master. Then he's like in Sanshin and going for all these moves. But you get panels describing, well, it's effective against this thing because of this. Like, some thought has been put into it and it's explaining what's happening. Now you compare that with, was it Baki the Grappler or Grappler Baki? I don't know the name. Baki. Like I had a friend who's really into it, and I hate to say, because I know a lot of people really like it, I can't get into it because it seems to be presenting a realistic world, but the fighting stuff is super exaggerated. At least from what I've seen, like there was I think in the manga, in the opening part, a guy gets his throat cut by the other guy's toenail because he has specifically grown it out and sharpened it so it can do stuff like that. And I caught a clip of an anime adaptation where there was this giant guy with a medical background, and as a fighter, his thing was, "I'm going to slap you in certain parts, and because I know medicine, it's going to cause vibrations through the liquid in your organs and muscles." And he was beating guys like that. I'm like, no. Neat trick. No. So because of that, I can't get interested in it. The flip side is, I don't know. Something like Kung Fu: The Legend Continues. I remember watching that growing up. I don't know how I would feel watching it these days. But in that, the character of Kwai Chang Caine, who was the grandson of the original Kwai Chang Caine from the 1970s Kung Fu series, he basically had magic powers. I think some of that was just the physical limitations of an aging David Carradine. But there would be scenes where a bad guy was hiding behind a wall and Kane was like sensing something. He had his fingers against the wall and then he like collapsed his palm against the wall. And on the other side of the wall, the guy was, pushed away by the force or something like that. So if you accept the idea that, okay, this is magic, they didn't outright call it that, chi powers, whatever, it's magic, then I think it's a little bit more acceptable, as long as the universe is playing by its own rules. But it's interesting to me how that sort of shown, like what are we expecting? I think there's a lot of people who are creating martial arts material who know like mythology and pop culture of martial arts, but don't, haven't really studied it a whole lot themselves. And, Xena Warrior Princess, where she would, hit the pressure points and, you have 30 seconds before the blood shuts off to your brain or something like that. Pop culture says that pressure points exist and they have certain effects and they are magical again, basically. Um, and again, it's interesting what this take is compared to something a bit more realistic, something more grounded in reality, and how we see it portrayed. I love fighting games that where the fighting has an element of realism to them. You'll notice that the games I have are just straight up combat sports games. I've also actually I've seen one that I think is a judo fighting game, but of course it was released in Japan ages ago. You know, but I also like pro wrestling because pro wrestling obeys its own in-universe rules. It's you can discuss how realistic it's supposed to be, but they're when the rules of the universe are obeyed, this is my finishing maneuver, and each time I hit somebody with this, it finishes them off. I understand that things, especially in the United States, have changed greatly in like the last 10 or 15 years since I stopped watching most of the stuff coming out of the US. Japan was a little bit different. The guys tended to have like two or three big moves, and then they had like their super killer move of there's a guy over there by the name of Kenta Kobashi who had this move called a burning hammer. And if you do this thing in an uncontrolled way, it can kill a guy because he's holding him upside down across his shoulders and then dropping him toward his head. And everybody involved in that has to know what they're doing so that the guy taking the move doesn't die, right? And partly because it's such a high risk move in universe, he's only done it like a half dozen times, you know. But he's got also like a more regular finisher. I think a lariat was one of his big moves where he just run at you and hit you with his arm as hard as he could. Um, so even in that sort of media, it needs to obey its own rules, and WWF pretty much doesn't. I hate to say it like that, but yeah, or it didn't. I don't know. It was sort of a turn off for me toward like mid to late aughts. Um, but again, there needs to be, as far as storytelling goes, the storytelling should be a part of each and every fight. It's not a cool move here, cool move there. Okay. Storytelling. Is it obeying the internal rules that we have set up? Is it obeying its own logic? And of course, this leads into the what is it, the inverse law of ninja, where the more ninjas you have, the easier they are to beat. But if it gets down to like the one dude, then he's almost impossible. Um, Overly Sarcastic Productions actually did a trope talk on that. I recommend all their videos, but I especially enjoy the trope talks these days. So check them out. Um, but even that sort of serves a purpose where, this is a crowd that I am meant to get through. And at the end of it, then we're telling the story of one guy against one other guy. So, this of course does come out of media. There is no way that fighting 12 really skilled guys should be easier than fighting one really skilled guy. Um, but again, this is the portrayal, this is the story that we're telling. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. Going back to my Media Fight Mondays stuff, I do tend to grade them on storytelling as well as, let's call it plausibility of the techniques being used. Had one of my subscribers recommend the final fight in the first Lethal Weapon movie. It's on my list. I didn't get to it this last Monday. Things have been a little bit crazy, and this is a labor of love. But unfortunately, at this time, it is not a full-time thing that I can focus on. So, for that subscriber, I promise that I will do my best to make that next Media Fight Monday coming up on the third Monday. But again, if you guys have any suggestions for topics I should cover, for books you'd like me to review based on the lists that I have provided, and of course, any media fights, like I said, I'm probably not going to get to any comic book fights, but I do love some comic book movie adaptations, including some stuff from the god awful Daredevil movie that Ben Affleck was in. I think I've got two of those fights in mind. I'm not picky. Even bad fights are fun to watch. Like the one I did for Bloodsport, which was ridiculous in terms of realism, but I love the movie. It's still one of my favorite movies to watch. Anyway, I think that's all I have for this week. It's been fun. I'm going to try to have maybe a bit more serious topic next month. But thank you guys for checking this out, and hope you enjoy the rest of your week.